Coming to you live from Benab House, Atomic Junction, Accra. This is Baina Midday News, and my name is Sharifatu Ayuba. Coming up in this afternoon's bulletin. President John Dramani Mahama has directed National Investigation Bureau to investigate alleged improprieties in the award of overseas scholarships. Also, GRA is stepping up efforts to close the gap in the implementation of the reform VAT. And on the international front, some Palestinians were allowed back to Khan Yunus after the Rafah crossing with Egypt reopened on Tuesday. We bring you details of these stories shortly. Thank you for staying with us. Remember, this news is streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube at Baina TV. Now the news in details. President John Dramani Mahama has directed the National Investigation Bureau to investigate alleged improprieties in the award of overseas scholarships. Minister in charge of Government Communications, Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, disclosed that the directive followed a radio discussion on Sumpa FM, during which a former public official alleged that an individual had paid money to secure a scholarship to study abroad.
According to the minister, the allegation was made by Mr. Kofi Ofosu-Nkansa, a former chief executive officer of the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, during a three-language program that has since attracted widespread public attention. Mr. Ofosu-Kwakye said the president considers the allegation serious and of grave public concern, particularly given the government's commitment to transparency, integrity, and equal access to educational opportunities. In a directive issued to the NIB, the president instructed the bureau to immediately investigate the matter, establish the factual basis of the claim, identify any persons involved, and determine the veracity of the allegations. The directive was contained in a letter dated 3rd February 2026, signed by Callistus Mahama, Secretary to the President, and addressed to the Director General of the National Investigation Bureau.
Now moving on to some politics, Bernard Entry Buesiako, popularly known as Chairman Buntumi, has officially declared his intention to contest for the position of National Chairman of the New Patriotic Party, positioning himself as a leader ready to make the ultimate sacrifices to unify the party ahead of the 2028 general elections. In a statement issued on Wednesday, February 4, the Ashanti Regional Chairman stated his bid follows extensive consultation with party elders and his maker, and is driven not by personal ambition but by a need to steer the party through a critical juncture. His declaration set the stage for a potentially heated contest for the party's top leadership position ahead of its national executive elections. Wontumi framed his candidacy as a response to a party that has faced challenges and learned hard lessons, emphasizing the need for steady, principled and committed leadership to restore confidence and empower the grassroots. The businessman, politician, and a powerful figure in the party's stronghold region described himself as a grassroots personified. He pledged to value every member from the elders to the youthful allies. The Food and Drugs Authority has urged the public to stop buying food sold near open gutters, warning that the practice puts public health at risk. According to the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the FDA in charge of the Food Division, Labarai Atakaice, the common habit of preparing and selling food in unhygienic surroundings continues to undermine efforts to improve food safety across the country. He described the situation as a long-standing cultural issue that calls for stricter enforcement alongside a shift in consumer behavior.
Mr. Atakaice said consumers have a role to play in protecting their own health by refusing to buy food from vendors who work in unsafe conditions. He said the authority is running public education campaigns in the markets and communities to help people identify unhygienic practices and choose safer food options. Mr. Atakaice said enforcement remains difficult, especially given the high number of informal food vendors across the country. He explained that under the Public Health Act 2012, Act 851, all food vendors, including itinerant sellers, must obtain permits and meet minimum hygiene standards before operating. He admitted that compliance level remains low and enforcement capacity is limited. Mr. Atakaice warned that poor food hygiene has direct consequences for public health, citing last year's cholera outbreak, which spread from the western region to central and greater Accra. He urged the public to make safer choices by refusing to buy food sold in unhygienic locations.
Well, on this note, we go for a quick break. We'll be back with business and more. Do stay.
Kingani, buat kita table. Lagi kita akan ini.
Saya kasih mai shi da.
Kishi dan mun
Mai
da
shi
kishi.
wannan abu ba. Ka san ba kuskure ne na zuwa wannan ba. Kuskure ba. Ya ishe. A kowane lokaci aure ke zama shakatawa da zaman lafiya. Akan samun sabani da rashin fahimta da gaddama tsakanin ma'aurata. Wasu lokaci tarbiyyar da yara yana ya zama matsalar aure. Ku kasance tare da mu akan shirin darasin aure a yayin da muke zurfafa bincike akan kalubale da ma'aurata ke fuskanta da yadda za a magance su baki daya tun daga wahala har zuwa nasara. A wannan karo za mu kawo muku wani sabon salo akan shirin darasin aure kowace ranar Laraba karfe 4 da rana tare da ni Hajiya Munira Mahmud. Darasin aure headquarter duk lamuran aure duk baki daya.
You're welcome back. If you just tuned in, this is Baina Midday News on Baina TV. Now let's move on to some business story. The Ghana Revenue Authority is stepping up efforts to close the gap in the implementation of the reform value added tax, which commenced on January 1st, 2026. To help resolve the issue, the GRA has integrated a new compliance and enforcement unit under the Domestic Tax Revenue Division to ensure that the VAT is paid accordingly.
This follows a revelation that about 60% of businesses are yet to comply with the new VAT, which is expected to provide some price relief to consumers. In addition, the situation, according to the GRA, is leading to revenue losses. The Commissioner General of GRA, Anthony Kwesi Sapon, disclosed to Joy Business that enforcing the VAT will boost state revenue and help in achieving the revenue target of the authority. VAT has the potential to boost the country's revenue mobilization if the law is well applied fairly across the country. The inauguration of the 26-member enforcement and compliance team is part of strategies by the authority to ensure that the wide gap in VAT collections is closed before the end of the year. The Commissioner for Domestic Tax Revenue at the GRA, Dr. Martin Yamborija, charged the newly inaugurated enforcement and compliance team of the GRA to act firmly and professionally to ensure taxpayers' rights. Speaking during the launch of the team, Dr. Martin used the occasion to urge taxpayers to engage the GRA on all forms of tax challenges.
Now, in some news beyond our borders, after the Rafah crossing with Egypt reopened partially on Tuesday, some Palestinians were allowed back into Khan Yunus. The trip took hours. People gathered on both sides of the border, hoping their names would be called. On the Egyptian side were patients who had fled earlier in the war. In Gaza, families waited near hospitals for news of medical evacuation. Crossings are capped at around 50 people in each direction per day, mainly for medical cases, with aid still blocked.
Israel officially reopened the Rafah crossing connecting Gaza to Egypt for pedestrians on Monday, but it only permits a limited number of Palestinians to re-enter Gaza each day. According to the Hamas-run Gaza government media office, only 12 Palestinians, 9 women and 3 children were permitted as the first group to return via Rafah, while 8 Palestinians were allowed to leave Gaza through the crossing for medical treatment in Egypt. Accounts for multiple returnees described prolonged questioning, sometimes lasting several hours, with some blindfolded or handcuffed. Returnees also reported strict limits on personal belongings. Historically, Rafah has been a vital route for both personal travel and the movement of goods. The reopening of the crossing is part of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas signed last October. However, movement has remained strictly limited. For the scores of sick and injured in the territory, its reopening offers a lifeline for the possibility of receiving care in Egypt.
Now, moving on to sports, Ghana and Zambia battled a thrilling 6-6 draw in the first leg of the Futsal Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. The Black Stallions took on early lead through a free kick, but